I love it. Now, you mentioned about it doesn't matter the tool, and that's fair. I mean, you know, certainly in my years working in L&D, I've seen a vast array of tools emerge. Every year there's more coming on market. It can be a quite noisy and confusing space with similar tools. So what would you say to look for? So I'll give an example. I think that sometimes some of the tools that are out there, you've got to be mindful of a couple of things. One is context. Without context, the meaning or the purpose of the tool can be easily lost, right?
Yeah.
And the second is, without that context or without a skilled facilitator, sometimes it can be like giving an AK-47 in the hands of a child, because you might misuse it, right? So that's just a couple of ways I think just to be mindful of. But what would you say to people looking to show caution with the variety and array of tools out there?
I think there's really three things you got to look at when it comes to tools, because there's three things that assessment companies tend to be really good at, and they're often good at one or two of these, not necessarily all of them. The first one is the research and the science that sits behind it. Yeah. And I'll touch on each of these in more detail in a second. The second is the marketing that sits behind it. The third thing is then the facilitation techniques and tools and resources that are available to people. Yeah. So, you know, there's some really good examples of tools out there that are just excellent when it comes to the research and validation and structure behind them. But, you know, on the marketing front, they're a black and white, you know, look like a Word document, that kind of thing. And that's hard for people to digest when you then stick that in front of them. So then the training resources might have to really elevate that, or if they don't, then it becomes an experience that falls flat for people. Yeah. You know, I think research is a big part of this. You know, TTI spends well over $1 million every year on research. Mm-hmm. You know, we have a department of people, you know, our head of R&D is, he's a neuroscientist, so taught at a university for many years on teaching using neuroscience. The sort of second in charge of that department, he's a PhD in pure math. You know, we've got guys who are psychologists, and, you know, we play with different technologies and techniques as well. So bringing in somebody who's just a mathematician as opposed to a psychologist who is great at statistics, because many of them are, that's a lot of what psychology is, and psychometrics in particular, it's all just math. So when we start to have a look at, you know, Eric is the guy's name, when he comes in and he starts to look at things, he doesn't care what the labels are or what the definitions are, or he's just looking at the numbers and does it do what it says it's going to do. Yeah. The other thing is, look at the time that something's been around. You know, there's stuff that comes out and it's really good on the front end, the marketing, the training resources. But when you peek behind the curtain, when you start to have a look at the evidence that they've got there, you know, they've got less than 100 people in their validation study, or they don't have a validation study at all. You know, these are the types of things that we've got to be really careful about. I mean, TTI have just done another validation study just recently, and I think just here in Australia, we did about 12,000 people was in our norming effort. Over in the US, it was about 280,000. So, you know, when we're doing things, we're trying to collect real samples, and we're trying to untaint that data as well. You know, one criticism that we had from some peers in research was you can't identify your database. And what that meant was we didn't collect a lot of demographics about people as they complete the assessment for all those years. I mean, we've done 30 million assessments since 2011. Every 7.2 seconds, someone does one of our assessments. That's how many are being done on a daily basis.
Wow.
And when we, excuse me, when we think about those things and that volume of information and what we've missed out on in data, it's frightening to think about. But we've now turned on an optional demographics page because we didn't want to force people to say, what year were you born, and, you know, what industry are you in, and really research qualify those people, because we didn't think, we thought that might turn them off taking the assessment. What we're finding on that optional demographics page, we're getting about a 70 to 80% fill rate on that page. So it's really giving us great stats on
Nice.
being able to cut up our database in different ways on more than just gender, because that was really all we collected.
Yeah. So it's really, I love how you've broken that down. When you're looking at tools, it's the research, which is a critical one. We're going to have some questions around that for sure. The marketing, I love that as well, because you can have the best tools that don't look that great, so people will question it. Right?
Or the other way.
Yeah, exactly.
You can have a rubbish tool that is just really well marketed.
Yeah, well, I actually wrote a blog. I've got a piece that almost went into the book, actually. It's what I call the candy floss economy, right?
Yeah.
Candy floss. And you see candy floss at the fun fair. It looks substantial on the stick, but it scrunches up. It's 99.9% air.
Yeah.
And to be frank, in the digital economy, this is the problem we've got with businesses generally. The lowest barrier of entry for many fields these days is credibility. That can be artificially kind of created quickly and swiftly. So I think it's a really valid point. But also the one about facilitation, which we'll come back to now.